Welcome friends, James Corbett here, CorbettReport.com, February 22nd, 2017. I remember quite vividly from my childhood growing up in the 1980s in my home province of Alberta in Canada, when there was a mandatory seatbelt law passed for the first time, Alberta being one of the last places in Canada to pass such a law, perhaps not surprisingly to those who know about the internal politics of Canada or the maverick nature of Alberta. And equally, perhaps unsurprising, is, I remember equally vividly, there were reports at the time when this law went into effect of the outrage that Albertans were expressing that the government could presume to tell people what to do, like wearing their seatbelts in their own cars. How dare they? And there were people who were literally cutting their seatbelts out of their car, literally cutting it out of their car in protest against that law. Now, fast forward 3 decades, and there aren't so many people cutting the seatbelts out of their cars these days. In fact, I doubt there's anyone who does that. Of course, I'm sure there are people who drive without seatbelts, but at this point, everyone knows that if the police catch you, you're gonna get a fine, you're gonna get a ticket. And it's just the way it is. And no one thinks to be outraged at the very idea that the government can do that. It's just the way it is. Well, there's an even more recent example that I can point to that I found quite interesting. Back in my last visit to Canada a couple of years ago, I was out for a drive with a couple that I've known for a very long time. And in this couple, the man always has a cup of coffee when we're out driving around, especially if we're on a long drive like we were about to go on. So I thought, oh, okay, so we're going to go out and get a coffee. And I was told in very solemn tones by the woman in the couple, oh no, James, I guess you don't know since you live in Japan now, but now in Alberta we have distracted driving laws, and it's against the law to drink a cup of coffee while out and about, while driving around. And I thought, oh, okay. And what was interesting to me was not so much the idea of distracted driving, of course. I think we can all relate to that in this current age of technological gadgets distracting people all the time. But the way in which this was told to me, as I say, in very solemn tones, oh no, James, oh, are you thinking, drinking a cup of coffee while driving? Are you crazy? That was kind of the way that it was said to me. And I just found that very interesting because, again, this was a couple that, I swear, a few years ago, would not have thought twice about the idea of drinking a cup of coffee while driving. It wouldn't have even crossed their consciousness that this was something to be concerned about. But now I was being told, oh, how dare you think about that? Very interesting. And the most interesting part about this, perhaps, is that I just looked up the law in preparation for this video and found that, in fact, I just took their word for it, but in fact they were wrong. It is not illegal in Alberta to drink a cup of coffee while driving. The distracted driving law does cite a number of specific things, actions that are prohibited, like texting, emailing, reading a book, clipping your fingernails, flossing your teeth. There are a lot of very specific actions that are prohibited under the law. Drinking a coffee is not one of them. So perhaps even more interesting than just the fact that this couple, has fully ingested this is the fact that they got it wrong, that in fact that's not even illegal. Now, again, I'm not going to argue about the safety or lack thereof of doing things like drinking a coffee while driving. Excuse me a moment. Of drinking a coffee while driving, but the fact that they had internalized this so much to the point where they actually believed it to be illegal when it is not, says a number of things. I mean, first of all, I can only imagine, because again, I'm not in Alberta, but I can imagine the type of forecourt press that must have preceded the rollout of this law. And I know exactly what that would have looked like. On the evening news every night, there would have been a way to shoehorn it in every single night about distracted driving and the new danger and blah, blah, blah. Again, I'm not saying that there isn't a problem with texting and driving. In fact, Brock West has some personal experience of some hairy incident with me and texting and driving and that kind of stuff. I fully agree with that. But I'm saying the fact that people can be have their consciousness so fundamentally changed so that something that was so normal can become abnormal, can become dangerous, can become illegal, even when it's not illegal, shows something about the ability of the social engineers to be able to engineer into society the types of behavior that they want or do not want. And obviously this goes well beyond seatbelts or drinking coffee in the car or that sort of thing. This goes to our most fundamental habits and opinions, which, by the way, if you look it up, is exactly what Edward Bernays, the man who literally wrote the book on propaganda, was talking about targeting. The habits and opinions, the everyday habits and opinions of people is what the social engineers want to engineer, and they can do it. I've seen it with my own eyes. So I invite you to think about your own life. And in the span of your lifetime, what have you seen that has changed so dramatically like that, where what was completely normal is now abnormal, or what was outrageous is now taken as, oh, just par for the course? Perhaps, for example, I remember what it was like to take a plane before 9/11 or something like that. We didn't have to take off our shoes and our belt and drop trow and all whatever else you have to do these days. I remember a pre-9/11 world. Well, for a generation that's growing up right now, they don't think of pre-9/11 or post-9/11. They just think of the world is just the way it's always been. And for them, there won't even be that process of indoctrination. It's very disturbing. So if you haven't thought about this before, I will put some links to some relevant Corbett Report material in the show notes for this video. I hope you'll check it out, thinking about the process of indoctrination, thinking about social engineering and propaganda and how these things can function. Again, it's about much more than just our everyday driving habits, but I think that's going to do it for today. James Corbett, CorbettReport.com.